Good morning, good morning. This is John Dingfelder. You're listening to WMNF Down and Dirty. Good morning, Jason Marlowe.
Good morning, John. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. My wife gave me a beautiful cup of coffee, and I am wired.
There you go. We got you juiced up. You're juicing. John is on the radio equivalent of HGH right now.
There you go. We have Irene on the boards this morning. Skip is busy getting ready for the next show, and we appreciate everybody's help. We have a great show this morning. We try our best. We are down and dirty, so we try to dig into local and state and sometimes national issues, dig in a little deeper, and we don't mind getting our hands a little dirty sometimes on difficult issues. And today's issue, Jason, as you know, is about let's call it the plight of the farm worker in America. And that's been an issue for 50, 60 years. I think it was Edward R. Murrow decades ago who first broke this story nationally. And, maybe things have gotten slightly better over the years, but maybe not. We'll talk about that. We have holding on the line with the Tampa Bay Times, Hannah Critchfield. Let's bring Hannah in. Hold on one second. Let's see.
Hannah, are you there?
Hey, I'm there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Hannah. How's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. This is John Dingfelder. You got Jason Marlowe, and we're glad to have you here on Down and Dirty. Hannah is a investigative reporter with the Tampa Bay Times. How long have you been there, Hannah?
Oh, I've been at the Times for about 3 years now.
Yeah, and I saw in your bio, I think you came from, Arizona and elsewhere?
Yeah, I spent some time in Arizona reporting, and then I was most recently a reporter in North Carolina before moving down here to Florida.
All right. It's a nice, sunny, warm Florida. What is it, about 38 today?
Yeah, just super sunny and warm.
and poor Hannah.
We got to build the wall with Canada because that's where the cold air is coming from.
Hannah was going to join us in the studio today, but she caught a little flu, so she's sparing us and joining us from home. Hannah, one of the stories that you covered this past year was the tragic bus crash that killed, I think, at least 8 farm workers up in Central Florida. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that crash and what the crash led to in terms of your investigative reporting?
Sure. So in May of last year, around mid-May, a driver of a truck and a bus carrying about 4 dozen farm workers collided in the Dunedin area, and it struck this bus, which it did result. You're absolutely correct in the deaths of eight farm workers, and it injured over 3 dozen more who were rushed to the hospital. And it wasn't just me. A team of reporters worked to respond to this crash. Within hours, one of my reporting partners, Juan Carlos Chavez, was able to speak with farm workers who had survived the crash, and it quickly became clear that they were traveling in a bus provided by their employer on their way to work in a local watermelon field. And
these buses, they're typically, you see them going down the highway. They're typically converted school buses.
Sure.
Kind of rattle trap looking. Yeah, sometimes they're kind of
going out playing City Way. You will see them every early morning and a lot of times at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. They tend to be these large school buses that have been converted to carry people to work. And one of the things that we found early on is that when buses are over 10,000 pounds, so when they're large, a typical school bus here in Florida and federally, and they're used to carry farm workers, there's no requirement that these vehicles be equipped with seatbelts, and that was the case in this crash as well. The bus did not have seatbelts, and there was no way. There was just nothing to equip the workers with safety belts in the event of a crash. And
that was a pretty bad crash too. I think did the bus go on its side or flip, or I know it went plowing off the road, right?
You're absolutely correct. Yeah, it veered, it skidded into a nearby field. It careened through a fence. You can tell from crash photos that it also had an interaction with a nearby tree. It left parts of the bus were left on the tree that it struck on the way into this field, and ultimately it did tip over on the driver's side.
Hannah, I was reading some statistics on this. I think this came out of one of your articles, that it says that farm worker crashes in Florida are 4 times more likely to be deadly than the average crash for the average citizen. And I would guess a big part of that is the lack of seatbelts.
And there are other factors that experts highlighted too. Farm workers tend to travel long distances, sometimes up to an hour. Sometimes I think experts highlighted more than that. But in this instance, workers were traveling about an hour each way to work. And then there is the seatbelt issue. And, it's interesting because I think this is an area that really could benefit from additional study. There have been studies at the federal level, I know, for buses that carry school children and the potential impacts of those lacking seatbelts. But we were not able to identify anything that specifically studied the impact of not having seatbelts on the same type of vehicle carrying farm workers. This incident really highlighted some of the worst potential outcomes of a collision like this.
Have you seen any response from legislators, either state or national, to jump in and address this? Is there a lobbyist group for farm workers in Tallahassee or Washington that you're aware of?
After the crash, one of our reporters, Romy Ellenbogen, wrote this excellent story in which she talked to several lawmakers about how they wanted to, if they wanted to, respond. And at the time, the person who headed the Senate Transportation Committee said he was open to discussing what we could do to make our folks safer, and that the crash caught his attention. He said, I think anytime there's an awful tragedy like this, we in the legislature need to take an opportunity to see what we can do. And, the session hasn't begun yet, so it sort of remains to be seen how lawmakers are going to respond. That lawmaker, it seemed to be something that caught the attention of lawmakers across the aisle. That lawmaker was a Republican lawmaker, and a Democratic lawmaker spoke to my colleague as well. And it was something that at the time, advocates said that they expected to bring to the next legislative session, this issue of seatbelts on buses for farm workers. And I should mention, I'd be remiss not to highlight that one of the things our reporting found was that, Florida is one of the few states that does require school buses carrying school children, like of this same size. They require seatbelts on those.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. A lot of places don't, but Florida moved to recognize this as something that they cared about, and they wanted to ensure school children were kept safe. But there's in current regulations on farm workers, smaller vehicles that carry farm workers to work do require seatbelts here in Florida. They passed a law after a deadly crash that happened in 2004 that killed several farm workers, because there's a long history of farm workers being killed on their way to and from work.
This is not just a Florida problem. It's a shame that it's not being addressed, nationally as a national requirement. So, not to stray away from the tragedy of that day, but where did this lead to in terms of your investigative reporting about other farm worker conditions? And by the way, how did these farm workers get here? Are they all illegals or what?
Oh, thank you for asking. Actually, in the crash that we and the folks that we spoke to, the vast majority of the people who were on this bus were here through a government-sanctioned program known as the H-2A program. It brings in farm workers to temporarily work in the United States from abroad. Many come to the United States from Mexico. It's the largest sending country, and that was certainly the case for the workers that we spoke to who had survived this crash. All of the 8 men who were killed in this accident were also participating in this H-2A visa program. It's temporary. It's designed to supplement. It's designed to fill hard to fill jobs in the agricultural sector by bringing in folks from abroad temporarily. So these jobs typically last for a few months, and then folks return home. So
Well, it's an invaluable program to the agricultural industry and to all of us who eat fruits and vegetables.
But a very controversial one nonetheless, because there's a lot of links of H-2A visas to criminal exploitation by employers, criminal working conditions imposed upon the employees, because a lot of these folks, they're almost indentured servitude or serfs. Their existence in the country is exclusively at the behest of their employer.
Yeah, what did you find out along those lines after the crash, Hannah?
Yeah, critics have long highlighted that the program's vulnerability is really centered around this idea that an employer controls many aspects of the workers' experience in the United States. They provide housing, they provide transportation to and from work sites generally. They often facilitate meals that the workers eat, and then
deduct all of that probably from their wages.
It's completely legal under the program, to deduct the cost of meals from wages. Absolutely. I mean, that's just part of the program, and all of these things are designed to make it easy for people who, don't have cars, who don't have permanent housing in the U.S. They're designed to make sure that farm workers who come to the U.S. under the program have shelter, stability. But it also can, as critics have pointed out, it also creates this dependency on the employer and
huge amount of control. And how about their passports? I was shocked to read that passage from your article.
Workers we spoke to described that upon their arrival in Florida, their employer asked for their passports, asked them to hand over their passports. And so at the time of the crash, workers we spoke to and first responders document in their records that they're unable to identify decedents. They're not able to identify anyone immediately. And they struggle to find any U.S. documentation on them. And that is one of the things that comes up when folks criticize the H-2A program. It often centers around just the limited enforcement capacity that regulators who oversee the program have. And so there's a mix, of just general ways that the program leaves folks ripe for abuse that critics highlight. And then there are things that are just not permitted generally under federal law. And one of those that experts highlighted is that holding of passports, holding of immigration or identification documents can be an indicator of labor trafficking. And so it's generally not something that employers should do, because it creates these added layers of vulnerability and added layers of potential control over these temporary employees.
Yeah, it seems like significant control. Hannah, you and your cohorts did a great job. I'm going to read a passage here. It says the Times identified at least 20 possible labor violations the company engaged in involving the workers, who ultimately spent just a week on the job before the crash. Workers recounted paying a recruiter thousands of dollars in Mexico just to secure their positions, an illegal practice under federal rules. Workers said they endured grueling hours in suffocating heat with no scheduled water breaks. They described collectively performing dozens of hours of unpaid labor. And I believe when they signed their original contracts, they were promised approximately $15 an hour, and they ended up getting $13 an hour. A lot of bait and switch also as related to the number of hours they were going to work each day. They originally were advertised they were coming into work six hours a day, and it turned out Hannah? They were working how long?
Workers described working from around sunrise. You have to leave before sunrise because of the commute, and then leaving well after sunset, arriving home around 8:30 p.m. at the earliest, and taking very limited breaks throughout. So it's long days, the days that stretch from sunrise till well after sunset.
I mean, I find it very funny. We consistently hear from folks on the right, particularly, Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance have both entered this conversation and suggesting that deporting these farm workers will enable these jobs to be opened up back for, domestically born Americans. I would love to see where they believe there's going to be a long line of domestically born Americans signing up to work from sunup to sundown, picking strawberries or working out in some of the fields these folks are working in. I just want to piggyback quickly on one of the points that John made from an article here from Politico. Quote, over half of all H-2A farm workers enter the country in debt to illegal recruiters who charge fees for connecting workers with job contracts. So like I said, when I use the term indentured servitude or serf, I really don't think it's inappropriate in relationship to how these folks are treated by their employers.
Yeah, the program is supposed to be free for folks to participate in. They have to pay the cost of their passport because that could theoretically be used for other types of travel, but cost of visas, cost of transportation into the U.S., certainly there's not supposed to be any sort of cost paid to any sort of recruiter to participate in the program. And that is something that's really clearly written in the H-2A rules, but it's hard to enforce. And it's difficult to enforce with the level of oversight that is available.
You interviewed those two women, one of which said she had paid $4,000, I think it was 80,000 pesos, to the recruiter down in Mexico. And then when the crash happened, there was no way to repay that recruiter, and that recruiter shouldn't have even existed at all. Really some horrific violations. It kind of reminds me, back in the day, they talked about the company town. Yep. Hannah, you're on the young side. Jason,
to the company store.
Oh my God!
There we go.
Now at this early morning,
welcome.
She has to suffer with your singing.
I have graced you all with the gift of my voice.
Well, Hannah, we don't mean to end on a light note, but we have another fantastic guest, just like yourself, coming in to talk about this issue. You're welcome to stay on. I know you're not feeling good. If you have to go, I understand. But Hannah, keep up the good work. Do you anticipate a follow-on story as related to farm workers or the bus crash?
This is definitely something that we remain committed to reporting on. And one thing I did just want to say is, it really remains to be seen. So far, the Trump administration has not moved to enact any sort of policies related to the H-2A program. I think the administration's future relationship with that program is sort of unclear. So it's not actually, right now, Florida is the largest user of this H-2A visa program that brings in farm workers. We bring in more than any other state.
45,000 per year.
And it's there's sort of, we'll continue to look ahead at what's happening at the national level and across the state. And we really appreciate you having us on the show. And if anyone wants to reach out to us, we have open tip and email lines available.
Right. And your email specifically is, I think, Critchfield at
TampaBay.com.
TampaBay.com.
The longest email possible, but you can find me on the website. With
the name Dingfelder, you have my sympathy and empathy. But no, on a serious note, if folks know of these types of issues, definitely, and or really, I think you're covering a lot of similar issues all across the region, so they can get in touch with you, right, Hannah?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. As a side note, Jason, I mentioned this to you earlier that when I was in law school a few decades ago, I studied agriculture. I have 2 degrees in agriculture. So when I got to law school, I decided that I was going to write a law review paper on sort of the plight of farm workers and what the federal government was doing about it. So that's my little farm worker claim.
No, I mean, I just want to give people, for the sake of an idea of the scope and scale of this. Now, this is a report from the Polaris Project. That's a nonprofit that works with migrant workers. They estimate H-2A visas issued by fiscal year, 2020 being the last available data released on this study, 213,394 workers. So this is a large scope and scale. This is,
I don't see the Trump administration touching this. For one thing,
this is what they like. This is wage slavery. This is
for one thing,
what they love.
Right, but for one thing, the agriculture community, I think, would just literally bring pitchforks to Washington if they touch it, number one. And number two is what will it do to food prices. Hannah, we're going to let you go. We're going to pick up Dr. Ernesto Ruiz. And Hannah, we appreciate all you do, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Take care, bye.
All right, let's put Mr.
Dr. Ruiz, are you on?
Good morning. I am here, and please call me Ernesto.
Ernesto, it's great to have you. Great to have you join us. Dr. Ernesto Ruiz is our second special guest today. We are talking about the farm worker bus crash up in Central Florida near Ocala. We talked to Hannah Critchfield with the Tampa Bay Times, and Dr. Ruiz, you are with an organization called
the Farm Worker Association of Florida.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about that organization, and then we're going to talk about what you guys do.
Thank you. We are a grassroots, community-based organization that is committed to fighting for the rights of rural farm working communities, immigrant communities, working-class communities. We are driven by the needs of our community. We're a member organization with over 10,000 members throughout the state of Florida. We work on policy, we deliver service, we do relief. We were actually quite involved with the bus crash survivors that you and Hannah were speaking to just a minute ago. So
you do hands-on day-to-day stuff as well as sort of big picture policy stuff, correct?
Absolutely. Every day, our office is full with people. We connect into services. We deliver services. We deliver food. We do policy. We do research. That is my particular area of focus: research on heat stress, on pesticides, on labor exploitation. But we do a little bit of it all here.
So Hannah Critchfield also did an article subsequently about heat stress, and we're going to actually have another show as it gets warmer. It's a little hard to talk about heat stress today, right? But
doesn't fit well.
But no, seriously, heat stress causes lots of deaths in lots of different industries, including farm workers, correct?
Absolutely.
And what, just recently in the legislature, you had a law brought forth that makes it illegal, I guess, for these folks to have regulated water breaks or heat breaks.
Well, illegal for local government
to enforce those, yes.
To require it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A completely senseless, cruel, and inhumane piece of legislation.
Well, like I said a couple minutes ago, I studied this and researched this about 30-something years ago when I was in law school, and the federal government had passed sort of an updated version of the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Worker Protection Act, which is a mouthful. And I wrote a law review article about it, and I really haven't followed up since. And I apologize for that. But has that federal statute been effective at all? I know it gave farm workers the right privately to sue, in addition to the, I guess, whatever agency supervises and regulates that also has the ability to sue violators. Is there any effectiveness in any of these federal provisions?
So within the context of H-2A workers specifically, or more broadly?
No, broadly.
Well, we have a huge issue in this country with enforcement. And as you all have been highlighting throughout the previous 30 minutes or so, there is a great amount of vulnerability that characterizes the farm working population. Both domestic, H-2A, and without proper enforcement, without proper oversight, there's very little mechanisms, there's very little recourse that our farm workers have to advocate and stand up for their rights. Moreover, if we take into consideration the amount of vulnerabilities to which they are which they experience on a daily basis, this complicates things. So, for instance, we have a lot of very large undocumented population, and we hear weekly, sometimes multiple times a week, from farm workers that they are treated quite poorly, that they're given poor water, that they're given no water, that their bathrooms are dirty, that they're meant to work long hours, that their wages are being stolen, and they're told that if they complain, that good luck trying to find another job. Because in the state of Florida, in addition to House Bill 433, which was passed this year, that's the heat-related protection bill, last year we had State Bill 1718, which requires any employer who has 25 or more workers to run their hires through E-Verify, the federal database to look at immigration status. So we're making it actively more difficult for our essential workers, our farm workers, the people who feed us, that can't be overstated, for them to do the jobs that U.S. citizens and U.S. residents do not want to do. They don't want to do it because the pay is poor, because the conditions are brutal. You mentioned that it doesn't make much sense to talk about heat stress today, but imagine being up at 5 a.m. in the fields, getting wet in your clothes as you're harvesting our food. And so the cold stress is a big issue as well. And then, we need to look at the housing where a lot of our farm workers live, where they reside, the communities. Oftentimes these are substandard structures, poor insulation, so very cold now, very hot in the summer.
And strictly speaking, all of that violates federal regs. But you talked about a lack of enforcement. When you run into people like that, do you have attorneys on staff or attorneys that you can refer these folks to? And do these lawsuits ever get brought?
We don't have attorneys on staff. If anybody listening wants to provide us some grants so that we can hire some attorneys, that would be wonderful. We do connect people with various law firms that they help us for either wage theft, for immigration cases, for all sorts of different abuses. We have contacts in the Department of Labor, in the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, in the Department of Health. So we liaise with all of these different agencies. And fortunately, there are great people on staff in different governmental agencies who care about our farm workers. But oftentimes their hands are tied because they're understaffed. It's not a policy priority. And in general, in the United States, sociologically, we want to sort of keep our farm workers out of mind. Not consciously, not explicitly, but we don't think about them. We have this sort of quite alienated relationship with food. We click a button on our phone, it gets delivered to our homes, our offices. Everything is instant gratification. And there's a huge distance, a huge gulf between the food that we consume and the systems that support the production, the harvesting, and distribution of it. That just doesn't enter our mind. It's not in our day-to-day thinking. So therefore, it's easy to sort of forget about this population.
Well, let's piggyback on that a little bit. 2 points. One, when Stephen Miller or J.D. Vance claim that the jobs that are held by these deported workers will be filled by U.S. citizens, and this is a quote from J.D. Vance, who will be now offered higher wages and better benefits to fill these jobs. One, I'd like you to address the lack of reality in those sentiments, and then two, I think I'd like to make a serious commentary on how does deporting these tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers related to our food supply in either the meatpacking industry or physical, harvesting of vegetables and fruits, how is that in any way, shape, or form going to reduce the costs of groceries for consumers here in America? I'd like to talk, I guess, a little bit about the hypocrisy of that. You can't deport the workforce and then anticipate the costs coming down.
Absolutely, 100%. If we deport our essential workers who are harvesting our food and planting it, the prices are just going to go up, period. So that's there's just nothing to it. That's a poor faith argument. Another poor faith argument is the one you just mentioned, that Americans are going to somehow line up to take these jobs. No, they're not. They're not doing that right now. The H-2A program has a provision that if any resident of the United States wants that job, the employer has to give it to the resident over the H-2A worker. They have to, by law. People do not want to work in the farms. People, by and large, do not want to work in roofing, especially in states like Florida, Texas, certain parts of California, where the weather is extremely hot and depending on which day it's humid. So it's a really interesting issue, and unfortunately, we seem to be in a situation in which ideologically and politically people gain political points, by beating up, metaphorically and literally, on poor, vulnerable populations who speak different languages, who look differently. It's a tale as old as time. Xenophobia works politically, internally. But then economically, it is actively hurting the interest of the big industry. It hurts the interest of the consumer. This is really poor policy. It's inhumane, and it's just silly because we have a huge, stable population in the country that wants to work. We have a huge industry that needs these workers, but because of political expediency, for political points, we're caught in this cycle of dehumanizing, blaming immigrants for all the woes of our society, which is laughable and empirically false and easily verifiable. If we look at crime records, if we look at crime rates of immigrants versus U.S. residents, U.S. citizens, you'll see that undocumented immigrants are less than half as likely to commit crime, especially violent crime, relative to their documented counterparts.
Because they don't want to be sent home.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's a big part of it. If you're just tuning in, this is John Dingfelder and Jason Marlowe. We're down and dirty on WMNF. We've got a couple of callers. Dr. Ruiz has joined us here from the Florida Association of Farm Workers, and we're going to take a couple of calls. Dr. Ruiz, I think you're going to stay on the line and participate with us unless I screw up dramatically. Hold on.
Yeah, let's get to...
All right, we got David, been holding very patiently in Tampa. Good morning.
Hi, good to hear from you all today, and a great topic. I'm tuning in a little bit late or kind of doing multitasking, but did y'all talk about, DeSantis really, his kind of failed attempt to try to get, curry favor with Trump and trying to get immigration...
No, we have not been able to cover that.
We didn't hit that. We can brush on it real quick.
For those who don't know, and thank you for bringing it to our attention, David. Ron DeSantis has attempted to call a special session of the legislature, specifically designed, I guess, to have a conversation in relationship to immigration. I guess they're trying to figure out...
wants Florida to be the first out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. It seems pretty clear that the legislature is not interested in taking him up on that, which is kind of interesting to see that...
He can call the session, but he can't control what happens.
Yes, correct. And the sense seems to be pretty clear that this legislature is not interested, has no inclination in serving him with a special session.
All right. Thank you there, David. We'll pick up Mike in Sarasota, a regular caller. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. My name is Mike Lachey, and I called 2 weeks ago as you were discussing bicycle facilities.
Right.
And unfortunately, I got cut off. And so then I called back, and you noted that I was on the line and said that you would get to me. But
I know. We always run out of time. We only have an hour.
We're
not talking transportation today, Mike.
Well, here's what I was going to ask. I realize that.
Okay.
So, but you said to call back sometime to discuss it. So you have a whole other show going on right now. Will you honor that promise next week? Can I speak to the topic as you promised that I would be allowed to next week?
Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll just have you as our special guest on a show dedicated to this issue. Call the station and get my cell phone number, and we'll talk separately.
Yeah, we'll find something to schedule something.
That is a promise. You're promising to allow me on some future show, correct?
We'll find a way to make that happen.
Absolutely,
yes.
Mike. Take care.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Reese, did I manage to keep you on the line?
It looks like he's still there. Fantastic.
So let's talk about the H-2A program a little bit specifically in regard to this. Some of the issues that Hannah brought up in her article and on the line today, the exploitation that you would think, okay, it's the H-2A program. It's been going on for decades. You'd think that we'd have a handle on it and there wouldn't be this exploitation, but it sounds like exploitation is a big part of it.
It is. It's 100%. The program is rife with human trafficking, with wage theft, with abuses, with breaches of contracts, and they start from the very moment that the recruiters come into contact with the workers in Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, other parts of Central America. And in a sense, yes, John, you would think that we would get a handle of this. But if we take a step back and look at the historical structures, the historical ways in which the U.S. economy has been built and run from the inception, it's been built on the exploitation of labor, specifically agricultural labor. One doesn't need to be, a scholar to remember the millions of Africans that were forcefully brought here, the millions of native indigenous peoples who were enslaved as well, genocided. And that structure, that pattern of exploitation and wealth generation, and moreover, the ideological underpinning that drives this incessant obsession with the creation of wealth at any cost still characterizes our economic system in the United States and moreover, the world over. So, yes, we tend to think, well, we're doing this. We would think we would get better at it. But the ideological core that runs us as a society is still the same one. And it's this obsession with wealth. And when you're obsessed with wealth as a society, other things will follow. You'll objectify workers. You'll objectify the earth. You'll objectify commodities. And anything goes as long as it's driving you towards this north guiding star of wealth generation.
Well, so let me throw a statistic. Two statistics that I read said we have 350 separate companies controlling the 45,000 H-2A workers in Florida. So you've got a lot of companies doing it. And then I read a statistic that said only 1% would expect a visit from a federal regulator in any given season. So, if you're a what do they call them when they're the crew leader, right? Mm-hmm. If you're the crew leader, maybe you're going to roll the dice and say, I'm not going to see the feds. I never see the feds. There's a 1 in 100 chance that the Fed's going to show up this year.
Absolutely.
So I'll take the chance and I'll treat people poorly and I'll pay them a few dollars less. Speaking of which, I got confused in the article. Are they paid by the piece or are they paid by the hour?
It'll vary. It'll vary on the contract. If they're paid by the piece rate, it should average up to $14 an hour and change. Mm-hmm. So I've seen both types of contracts. Your previous guest talked about how the employer can deduct meals from their paycheck, and that is correct, but they can only deduct at around $15 a day if the employer provides them with 3 meals, and we've seen pay stubs where they're deducting way more than the $15. So
and I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you know what I think a big shortfall in these laws are? And this goes all the way back to the, like I say, 30 years ago when I studied the Agricultural Worker Protection Act, is there, even though you can bring a lawsuit, you don't have a right to attorney's fees if you're successful. And that's a very subtle point that lawyers would make note of, because in certain types of situations, the statute says, the prevailing party will get attorney's fees. Well, what that does is that entices lawyers to get into that business of bringing those types of lawsuits. And unfortunately, the way I read this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ernesto, I don't see those provisions, and therefore you probably don't have a lot of lawyers chomping at the bit, no pun intended, to take on these lawsuits. Am I correct?
You are correct. In fact, we have a much easier time referring people to accident, to lawyers dealing with injury, lawyers dealing with that sort of violation, because the lawyers know that there's a nice payout for them. And
right.
It's very hard to find immigration lawyers. And yes, you're 100%.
Or a labor lawyer who's willing to really, dig into this type of thing, because what's Absolutely. In it for them? And I mean, it sounds a little cynical, and all lawyers, should be doing the right thing. But unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case.
Sure.
Dr. Ruiz is with the Florida Association of Farm Workers. If you want to learn about more of them, they have a beautiful website. They have 5 locations around the state where they're helping people. Dr. Ruiz, we've got Gary in Bradenton. Let's see what he has to say. Gary, are you with us?
Gary, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hey,
Absolutely.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning. I wanted to ask, I'm in my 60s and I've worked on farms the better part of my life. And, when you call them farm workers, we always call them migrant farm workers because they started down in Miami and then they wound up all the way in Connecticut harvesting. Yep. So It's very difficult. It was very difficult for, we could see the abuses, but we always tried to stay on top of it and kept the farms where they were good to the people that came and worked. And even back in the 80s, I mean, a family could make $150 a day, which wasn't bad. And just never could understand how much that, they got to bring home, because it was always a crew. It was always a crew leader, and you had to contract it out well before the season came to harvest, and you had to hope that your fruits or vegetables came in at the time where the migrants were there, because if you missed them, they'd be up in Tampa, and then they'd be up in Tallahassee, and then they'd be up in Georgia because they're moving north,
Sure.
But like on that school bus accident, the transport accident, you can't drive a school bus unless you have a CDL license, and that's a B-class license, and it's supposed to have the proper insurance as well if you're hauling so many people. So that's something that's pretty you can regulatory. Any highway patrolman can stop one of those guys and make sure they have all the proper.
Well, in this school bus crash, I don't know if you read the story. Sadly, they were kind of sideswiped by what was probably a drunk driver. So we can't even blame the bus driver on this one.
I'm not blaming him. I'm saying that there are regulations on who drives the transportation, and the school buses are pretty darn tough. And hey, I got news for you. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and we didn't have seatbelts. It's just the way it was back then. And the windows were down. It was hot, but it's always hot in Florida. And
except for today.
Those guys, except today. Those guys, their families that came in, and the farmers, they always had little porta potties. They had a place where to take a break and a lunch and all that. But I was pretty much working on smaller farms, 300 acres of tomatoes or watermelons or whatnot. And they're good, hardworking people. And,
sure.
And nobody wants that job. It's not like a roofing job. I did roofing, too. Roofing is nothing compared to harvesting fruits and vegetables from daylight, break in the morning till nighttime. And you want to talk about a real tough one is how about harvesting oranges where you're up on a darn ladder the whole time? Those orange trees used to be 20 feet tall.
Yeah, I've got a story about that, too. Gary, thanks for calling. Thanks for listening, buddy.
Thank you, Gary.
So when I was in college at the University of Florida, Dr. Ruiz, my roommate had dropped out of school, so his father said, fine, go get a job. So we read in the newspaper that they were looking for orange pickers. So we went down we went down to near Ocala, and we decided, okay, we'll pick oranges. And that lasted a day because neither of us had ever done anything so difficult for so little money in our lives and risked our lives climbing those ladders. So Dr. Ruiz, a shout out to all of the folks that you work with who pick our food and harvest and at great risk to themselves.
Absolutely. The oranges, it's particularly telling. The bags that they use to fill, which you probably remember and have nightmares of, they can weigh up to 90 pounds when they're full. And there's been studies that show that farm workers on an average day will move in between 1 to 2 tons of weight. And,
Dr. Ruiz, picture this. I'm 6 feet tall. I was in good shape in college. 200 pounds. And I could not figure out how to maneuver that ladder to get it up to the tree. It is not an easy task. And yet these much smaller gentlemen than me were just whipping that ladder around like it wasn't even there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But
and there's a ton of disincentives for people taking care of their health. The wage structure with the piece rates, they're paid by how much they produce. Therefore, our farm workers deliberately dehydrate themselves so that they don't have to waste time going to the bathroom. These are their words.
Wow.
And you think of that in the summer. So we have insanely high rates of acute kidney injury, all sorts of health complications that come from dehydration and heat stress.
It's crazy. All right, we're going to take one or two last calls. We've got...
I bet I know who this is.
Kelly in Tampa. Never heard of him.
Well, I think you've got the name wrong.
Different Kelly.
Different Kelly.
Jason messed me up.
Yeah, I thought...
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kelly.
Thank you. I want to get to the bottom line of this immigration system. It's all about politics. And it would be so great for the whole world, like Spain is doing, is to have a welcoming system. People who don't want to go home, you come and you work. My dad, as an elderly man, picked fruits in Florida. And
where did he come from, Kelly?
San Andres Island, South America, Colombia. And we have to realize that this is all politics, because look now at what we are dealing with this guy. And so the whole situation is a farce. Immigration in this country is a farce. And that's the reason South American leaders and presidents, they laugh. They laugh at because we, the people, do not tune in and learn that this is all a farce.
Yep. Kelly, how ironic is it that every single person in this country, except for indigenous Native Americans, at one point was an immigrant?
Thank you
listen,
very much.
we appreciate your call. We appreciate you listening. And we'll take one last call, Dr. Ruiz, and then we're going to circle back to you. This is Stephen in St. Petersburg. Good morning.
Good morning to you. You know, I was listening to your show.
Thank you.
And now, when you look at 249 years since the revolution, we are still having the same discussion about the anti-labor practices in the United States, not only for farm workers, but restaurant workers, grocery store workers. It's interesting. I came down here about over 40 years ago, and nothing's changed in the state of Florida. I came from Michigan. You know, I was making $14.96 an hour working at A&P grocery store. And I came down here when my parents retired, and then I got to know people, talking to people. What do you make? $4.50 an hour, $5 an hour. This is like in the early 80s.
Yep.
But today, we're still having the same discussion that people have to live with their parents because the wages are terrible.
Or work 2 or 3 jobs.
Yeah, Florida's still a right-to-work state. It still stinks of the Confederacy, and the political duopoly do nothing to get organized labor down here, labor unions, so people can start making money again.
Oh, I mean, listen, one of the problems is, frankly, sir, it's an extremely anti-labor state. This is a right-to-work state, which really means right to fire. It's just a nonsense, semantics, terminology.
How do we get rid of that?
I mean, it would take, to my understanding, I think you would need either the state legislature or some form of constitutional amendment, which, of course, DeSantis is now trying to limit these citizen-led constitutional changes. So who knows?
Well, it takes 60% too. Hey, Stephen, we appreciate your call. Appreciate you listening. Have a great day. All right, Dr. Ruiz, let's circle back and sum up a little bit. We got a couple of minutes to talk about, what. I think your organization is in pretty good company. There's several comparable farm worker advocacy organizations around the state. Do you guys get together and strategize about, what we can do in the big picture and the policy picture and the legislative picture?
Absolutely. Not just around the state, around the country and around the world. And that's a really good point because we are an organization, but as an organization, we're part of multiple alliances with a number of different organizations, each with a slightly different focus. And this work can't be done in isolation. So organizations need to organize and come together. And yes, well, absolutely. We strategize, we look, we think, we react. Unfortunately, oftentimes, a lot of what we're doing is reacting. Right now, we're sort of just in a study and anticipation and wait period to see what exactly is going to unfold with the immigration landscape with the new administration.
Did we make any progress in the, working with the prior administration? I know we're probably going to play defense for the next 4 years. But were we playing any offense in the last 4 years?
So it's a good question, and it's a really good point to bring up. We were headed in the right track as far as federal heat-related protections. OSHA is reviewing comments right now, but, where that's going to end up with the current administration, who knows? That's something that I can certainly highlight that was positive, pro-worker of the previous administration.
But it didn't get through. It didn't get through in time, unfortunately, I guess.
It's being reviewed right now, but, who's going to be in charge of OSHA? Who's going to implement it now? Who knows?
Yeah.
That's something
Elon Musk, I think.
Oh, yeah. God help us. On that note, however, I think it is important to note that this anti-immigrant sentiment, this anti-worker sentiment can only flourish and it can only be an effective tactic of political division if people's pocketbooks are hurting. And so I am referring to the people who subscribe to this DeSantis Trump ideology, these talking points about immigrants stealing our jobs and being criminals. That type of ideological warfare only works if those people's pocketbooks are hurting. And that happened under a Democratic administration, as it has with Republicans and Democrats. We've been flip-flopping back and forth, and the conditions in this country have been getting continuously more difficult, for working-class folks, for middle-class folks. So this is not an exclusively Republican-caused situation. The Democrats are just as guilty, if not more, because when they get into power, they do not make changes that actually impact the everyday living condition economically and in many other ways, that therefore opens the door for these like right-wing talking points, this right-wing populism. So no, unfortunately not. They really didn't improve anything for our immigrants, for our working class communities. And then they handed the election to Donald Trump on the backs of a genocidal allegiance to Israel as well.
So in regard to farm workers, are you just, is your organization, Florida Association of Farm Workers, just deal with folks out in the fields, or do you also deal with processing plants? Because I know there's a lot of, agriculture-related employees, in the processing part of fruits and vegetables.
Yes, no, we work with anybody involved in the food systems, as do some of our partners. We work with people who don't have anything to do with farm working as well. We work with construction workers, with roofers, but a good, solid, holistic focus on the food system necessitates not just the field, but distribution, packaging, processing. So absolutely, we have worked and we will continue to work anybody involved in this food system. And again, anybody, migrants, rural communities, working class folks who need help, we're there for them.
And how do they find you?
Word of mouth, to be quite honest.
No, I mean, if our listeners are listening and they want to help, what's your website? How do they get in touch? Is there a way to contribute? What have you?
Absolutely. You can tell I'm not really good at marketing. Our website is floridafarmworkers.org. If they just look up the Farm Worker Association of Florida on Google, it will come up. It has links to how they can get involved, donations, our community initiatives, studies that we've done, so on and so forth.
Now, you have five branches, or at least that's what the website said.
Yes, we do.
I didn't see any in Hillsborough or Manatee, I don't think.
No. The closest one to Hillsborough would be our Apopka office. We do work there. We did some hurricane response there. We liaise with folks out over there.
Yeah, because we still have quite a bit of farm workers in our area. Specifically, like I said, Hillsborough used to be a lot of tomatoes. We still have strawberries up there in Plant City, obviously.
For now.
Right now?
No, for now, because remember we had a conversation a couple months ago with former Commissioner of Agriculture, Nikki Fried, about how climate change is going to change the Goldilocks zone for strawberry growing, which eventually will become north of Plant City, probably more like the Gainesville area.
That's interesting. And then, of course, down to the south, Manatee's always been a lot of tomatoes and other truck farms. But I guess you're just reaching out across the middle of the state to come over here and help people.
We try to, and we're lucky to have partners further up northwest. There's the Rural Women's Health Project. There's all kinds of coalitions, faith-based, community-based, that are working throughout the state.
But Jason, you're involved with a group out of Ruskin?
I work with Enterprising Latinas. Liz Gutierrez, and an amazing organization out of Waimama that does a lot on helping folks in this community. Big shout out to Liz Gutierrez and Enterprising Latinas for the wonderful work that they do.
Well, Dr. Ruiz, we're running out of time. We appreciate you joining us today, and we will have you back. Like I said, when the weather starts heating up, we're going to have a long conversation about this heat issue, heat in the fields, heat with the roofers, and that sort of thing, and see what we can do to improve those conditions.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and look forward to having more conversations with you all, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. You too, sir.
Thank you. So John, anything you want to say in the last minute or so we have left? Is there anybody you wish we had time for that we didn't have time for today?
There's a lot of people involved in these farm worker issues, but we only have so much time. I encourage people really to get involved in this. After my experience as a junior in college, trying to pick those oranges one single day, okay, I beg people to go out in the field and pick something for one single day, and you will appreciate farm workers for the rest of your life.
No, I want to thank a person who we always want to have on the show. We wish we had time for Commissioner Joshua Wostel. Just a couple months ago, the reason why I mentioned the infamous Commissioner Wostel was he decried that there's no such thing as migrant workers. Because of the H-2A and H-2B visas, there's no such thing. That terminology is outdated. the people who pick our food. We need another
probably
term for
very
them.
knowledgeable on the issue.
I'm sure he's very knowledgeable on all the issues. We're really sorry we ran out of time and didn't have time for Commissioner Wostel. But to play us
what
out,
are we going out on?
We are going out to Jim Croce. He's the migrant worker. Everybody have a wonderful Friday and stay warm.
All right, shout out to my bride.
Beginning wasn't easy, kept me brown and thin. Then a child for every season that the fruit was on.